Welcome to Real Talk Farm Stress, our podcast from Penn State Extension. I'm Sonya Nace, your host for today. And with me today, I have Phil Taylor and Rob Goodling from Horizon Farm Credit, and they're part of the consulting team that covers Pennsylvania and beyond. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Welcome. Glad to be here, Sonya.
Thanks for having us, Sonya.
Absolutely. And so we're really here today to talk about our farmers. Our podcast goals are really to talk about breaking the stigma, asking for help whenever a farmer it needs additional support from those stressors, from the economic issues they face, the weather issues they face. And so I'm really glad that both of you are here to join us in our podcast today. We know that farmers want to hang on to their land at all costs, which makes them work incredibly hard. They have unusual pain and hardships and sometimes have to take uncommon risks just to be successful or even break even. I'm very excited to hear how Horizon and your work with farmers and our farming community has really shaped what you do in your conversations with them. What do you all see as some of the causes of stress for farmers in your work as business consultants?
Sonya, that's a great question. A lot of our work is with feasibility studies and financial analysis. And we also work with farms on transition planning that revolves around looking at and assessing not just the financial position of the business, but what are the members of the business wanting to do with that and what's the trajectory. And so this can tend to lead to a lot of stress and a lot of issues, and we really can think about them in a few key areas. First, obviously, is the stress of the high labor business. A lot of the operations we work with in agriculture is very time intensive. They don't feel like they have enough time to get all the tasks completed or get them completed at a level that they want to. It might be more of that for the livestock than crop. However, there are seasonality effects where there is just a lot to get done and not enough time in the day to do it. Sometimes our farms are stressed from the standpoint of, with this labor issue, can they find good employees and keep them? And so current employees aren't good workers, or the farm is trapped with poor help and not actually getting the help they need to complete the task at hand. Obviously, with what we work with on financial analysis, there's the concept of financial stress. Cash flow, not having enough cash to pay bills within a given month or a given time frame. We also can think about the financial stress caused by looking at profitability. And probably there we see it more where not knowing if the business is profitable or not, because they're not measuring it, they don't know it. It makes it more challenging because of an unknown that is, well, are we doing okay? Aren't we doing okay? And that starts to build up some of that stress. It might be that they're have unavailability of credit, so they're not able to get the loans to do the improvements they want, or they're having a challenge with that. When we think about it from a transition standpoint, the capital replacement. How do we reinvest in the business on the tight margins most operations function under in today's agricultural economy to replace that capital to keep the farm efficient and keep the farm running without sacrificing something else down the road? We can also think about the production stresses. Weather usually comes to mind, right? What are we going to be able to do with our crops? Are we facing a drought condition? Is it the rain ever going to stop so we can get in the fields to plant or to harvest? We think about livestock performance and the stresses related around that. So a lot of that can take a toll on the productivity. And those are some things that may be outside of our control, but still can cause stress. The final one to think about is just communication. And that really comes back to that, transition planning or the business side of, are we communicating with all business partners? Is there a clear roadmap that everybody understands and can work towards? Or are we making assumptions and having some errors and some stress because we don't know what other parties in the business are thinking about?
So, Phil, what impacts do you see this stress having on the productivity and profitability of farms you work with?
We often see the reduction in productivity from the potential stress usually results in the financial position itself. So this productivity is having an impact on the financial aspects of the farm, and that's creating a high level of stress. Rob alluded to this communication issue where we see people don't want to talk about the hard things, and that's very stressful, and it only grows and builds over time because we're not talking about things. We're not discussing issues on the farm that need to be talked about and problems need to be solved. People under stress sometimes feel like it's hopeless to accomplish their goals and objectives. And that to-do list gets long and out of hand, and they lose sight of the priority of the tasks that are before them or in front of them. So these things don't get done, and that eventually leads to bigger problems with productivity. It might lead to an accident, a higher cost repair, all kinds of other bigger deals than the original issue was itself. An example of that might be a farm that has a normal routine maintenance program for their buildings or machinery. And during that routine maintenance, they might discover a relatively inexpensive repair that needed to be done on the machine. But due to a time constraint or some other constraint, the maintenance was not done, and it resulted in a much larger breakdown of the equipment. That might cost a lot more, take a lot more time, be a lot more expensive, and it just results in some more stress that they didn't do the small thing in the beginning, led to a bigger problem later.
Absolutely. And those small things can lead to more expenses, a bigger fix later, or like you said, even an accident could occur.
Right. And much of that can be linked back to the lack of the communication. Someone didn't inform someone else about a small issue or a small problem, and it ballooned from there.
Yeah, farmers are really busy, so sometimes communication falls to the wayside.
Sure does.
So, Rob, in your opinion, how much control do farmers have over these stressful situations?
So obviously some stressful situations are out of our control. There's going to be external factor or external sources of stress that we react to and not necessarily inflict. But some of that stress is self-inflicted. And many of us tend to worry too much about things. And many of those stressors that come from that worry could be a result of something that's just beyond our control. So for most farmers, they're going to be the price takers when it comes to their products and the price that they're going to receive for their products they're producing on their farms. The stress over the farm gate price for grain, meat, or milk is kind of futile because there's not a lot of opportunity to adjust what we're going to get. They have much more control over the quality or quantity of product that they're producing and can think about how am I producing this in the most efficient way possible to help gain that margin without necessarily stressing about what the prices are going to look like in the short term. Whether stress is self-induced or from an external source, the question to ask is what can we do about it? If nothing, then it's just let it be and try to stop worrying about it. And that's difficult to do. For example, I can't do much about the cost of gas at the filling station. But when there's an opportunity to do something about it that can be identified, that is the time that you need to act. Going with that same example, if I can't control the price of the gas at the filling station and I want to try and reduce my expense for fuel, I can look at trying to reduce the number of trips I'm making to various places that maybe aren't as necessary or critical. Likewise, maybe my next vehicle purchase, I'm going to look for a more fuel efficient system to try to gain some efficiencies in that next reinvestment. So farmers have varying levels of control over these stressful situations. How they handle them is going to be key. Can they be eliminated? If so, how? Likewise, is there an opportunity to mitigate them? But again, how do we do that? And also, there's a key component to realizing just some of those stresses are beyond our control, and we need to refocus on those that we have some ability to make a difference in.
I was thinking about this in regards to there's a prayer out there called the Serenity Prayer that says, God, help me to change the things I can. Give me the courage to change. No, what is it? The serenity to accept the things I can't change, the strength and courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that wisdom is a very key part of that understanding. What can we change? What can't we change?
That is a hard thing to learn. What can I change? And then also to accept it all too. You're right, Phil. So can you think of, Phil, that farmers can do to reduce or mitigate these stressful situations?
Well, first of all, we got to remember that as we were talking, they'll never completely be able to mitigate or eliminate all sources of the stress on their farm operations. It just kind of goes with the territory. But there are a lot of unknowns in today's agricultural enterprises that can be challenging. And so new things are being thrown at our farmers all the time. The best way producers can help is to have an assessment of what's going on in their operation so that they understand some of the reasons for the positions that they're in. Having a roadmap in place as things come up, as things happen, they have the ability to be more proactive in response than being reactive. So if we can turn that table and get on the front side of some of these things rather than on the back side. One other way, I believe, is allowing trusted advisors to help them with mitigating their stress. For example, an external management team can not only help the farm identify some key issues, but could also outline the goals and action steps that the farm needs to correct a problem that's causing a lot of stress. Thereby, to a degree, they can reduce the stress that's caused by that issue. There are perhaps 3 keys to mitigating stress. The first is honesty, and that is to be honest with yourself and with the others on your team at the farm, understanding, communicating, and being upfront and honest with people. Second one would be to be transparent with where the issues are and the degree of that problem, and identifying how the issue arose and the current position that it's currently in and causing the stress. So we're honestly evaluating and looking at what that stress is and where it came from. And then thirdly, having a plan, looking and trying to think to where you want to be and how you're going to get there, and have a contingency plan so that if something does happen, there's an alternate pathway to do what needs to be achieved. And that in the end, hopefully reduces some of that stress.
Yeah, having a plan, and sometimes it just depends on the time of the year, the season that things can get done, and maybe sometimes getting ahead of things in the wintertime. That's what my dad and my grandfather would always seem to do, the little things to be ready for the next season coming up in the wintertime.
That's very good wisdom right there. Taking the time that's available to identify and eliminate some of those stress points.
Yeah. Seemed like they were always in the shop doing all the things that they couldn't do whenever it was summertime and harvest time. So,
yep.
So how can business planning help? And Rob, I'm going to send this question over to you. How can business planning help to minimize or alleviate stress for farmers?
So often the stress that's demonstrated by producers has some underlying components related to the financial position of the business. Sometimes it may be more heavily financially based than others, but usually there's a financial component. So by deploying business planning strategies and looking at the numbers and being aware of the current position and potential future positions through budgets and comparisons, business planning actually can do a lot in a little amount of time and effort to reduce stresses and, more importantly, maybe mitigate and stave off some stresses before they happen, just simply by running the numbers and being aware of where you're at. There's the old adage, you know what you know, but if we don't measure it, we can't actually react to it. And so by having that business plan and looking on a regular basis at the numbers to say, this is where we're at, this is the trajectory we're headed, now we start to be able to have that conversation about if we need to change course or adjust to keep the course where we want to go. How do we deploy that? What is needed? Is there additional capacities needed? The other thing I think about when we look at business planning is so often on our farm operations, a few people are heavily involved with the financial record keeping. They have a better sense of what the finances look like or a feel for where the finances are on a routine basis. But as our enterprises diversify or get larger, are all the business partners or business members aware of that same feeling? Does everybody understand that we can't invest in that new piece of equipment just yet because of X, Y, or Z? So often that usually creates the stress of, well, they just don't like my idea, and they don't realize the underlying tone really comes back to the financials of the operation.
So while farming is really a lifestyle, we have to really remember it's really a business too. Hand in hand, one has to work with the other. To be a lifestyle, you have to realize the business aspect. So, what are some of the resources from Farm Credit that could help farmers deal with the stress?
Well, I like that question, Sonya. We've been talking about some of them, specifically our business services related to the consulting services that Rob and I and the others on our team do. we provide business planning and feasibility studies and transition planning. And within all of these, the goal is to get the farm owners and operators to have conversations early before things get to a point where it causes some of that stress and becomes a elevated level of stress for the operation. So we want to get people to the table, talking about the issues, identifying what are the key issues that need to be dealt with. How can we best put a plan together to alleviate some of that? We'll never alleviate all of it, but helping people to feel better about and doing that communication piece for eliminating some of the stress. So we think that helps a lot. Another one of our services is related to records service. One of the stressful situations for farms is the financial bookkeeping, managing payroll, and compiling financial reports that the owners, the bankers, the lenders, and other advisors need. So our accounting, records, and tax team can help provide those resources at a reasonable cost to help farmers with these important aspects of the business. Keeping up with the payroll tax laws and periodic payroll tax payments, for example, can be real stressful for farm families. This is especially true of the current and future generations, where we see spouses of farm owners increasingly have off-farm careers, and no one has the time to keep up properly with some of the aspects of the bookkeeping responsibilities. And so it's a different look to the farm today than it was 2 or 3 generations ago, when everybody was at the farm. One of the spouses generally was the bookkeeper. We don't necessarily have that same situation anymore, and that can be an area of real stress. And our accounting and records and tax team can help significantly there.
You're right. Many of our farm families do have one of the family members working off the farm just to provide other types of income and benefits for the farm family themselves. You are right. It's completely different than it was a few generations ago. So Rob, can you provide any examples of a stressful situation for a farmer that the farm was able to fight through and have success in reducing or even eliminating stressful situations?
Absolutely. Now, again, depending on the stress, we may not be able to completely eliminate it, but if we can mitigate it and reduce it to a manageable level, that's really what we're trying to achieve. So an operation I worked with one time was having trouble with just basic cash flow. And again, part of this was a communication issue, part of it was a financial issue. We weren't looking at the numbers. We didn't have a good handle on where we were at and what our trajectory looked like. And so they were beginning to question, will there be an opportunity to improve where they are and what their position is and get to a better spot? Or do they really need to think about an exit strategy, which really starts to put a lot of stress when we think about farms not wanting to be, the business that, sold the farm or the business that went out and ended the generations of support that's been before them. So there was a lot of emotions tied to this. And that usually does, when emotions get added on and tacked onto the communication or lack of communication, tacked onto a financial unknown, we start to build that stress and how much stress we're putting on ourselves. And it can be very challenging. And sometimes it's as a role as a consultant, coming in and being able to remove some of the emotional components to how we respond to that, especially the respond to the financial stress, and just look at the picture more objectively from a business perspective. We were able to do just some basic business planning to start to look at the finances, look at the historical numbers, start to project out where do we think we're going to be. And that allowed the discussion to open up to say, well, we'd like to be in a better position. What can we do differently? What are some management practices or what other opportunities do we have to adjust our business so that our financial position does improve? Now, there's no guarantee with that, right? We can't control everything, but just by being able to play and have some contingency plans, there started to be a better sense of comfort. So from a stress standpoint, a lot of the members of the business then started to feel a little less anxiety, a little less stressed. They weren't seeing that. And we saw their engagement with the process improving. Over a period of time, they were able to resolve a lot of what was causing them stress with the finances. And the key for me was it gave the producer and his family an ability to enjoy what they were doing before. Because a lot of times when that stress comes into play, we don't necessarily enjoy what we are doing, or we lose the sense of why we're trying to do what we do. And so by reducing that stress, this particular family was able to go back and enjoy what they were doing. They realized how they could get to where they wanted to be, and it just involved a little bit of planning and a little bit of foresight. And sometimes the stress builds and it gets internalized, and people don't allow themselves to enjoy those things. And this can really actually lead to greater mental health challenges if it's not addressed early or it's left to fester for a long period of time.
We've gone over so many things in our short time together today. You know, seeing a farm as a business has so many different facets, and knowing that there's resources like farm credit to be able to come together to come up with solutions, think ahead, find ways to enjoy farming and enjoy what the farmers are doing again, the farm families, is really key here. And also just knowing that there are other types of resources that if someone talks to someone who's a trusted friend or neighbor, and even for those who maybe utilize 988 as a resource for dealing with a mental health challenge, there's so many ways for farmers, farm families, agricultural workers to really take back their mental wellness and enjoy what they're doing. Phil, Rob, I really appreciate all of the time that you spent with me today, and that you were willing to go on a podcast and talk with the world about dealing with the stresses of working, living, and having a farm business. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sonya. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sonya. Glad I could assist.
Thank you. And for more information, you can go to our website at Penn State Extension and join us again for our next Real Talk Farm Stress podcast with Penn State Extension. Have a great day.